There are drinks we consume and forget, and then there are those that define entire generations. Beers that were not merely poured into pint glasses, but poured into memories, friendships, and culture itself. Today, we journey back through time to rediscover the legendary brews that built Britain's pub nights and then mysteriously vanished forever. These are not just stories about beer. These are tales of social change, industrial revolution, and the relentless march of progress that sometimes tramples tradition underfoot. The revolutionary pint, Watney's Red Barrel pictured Britain in the 1960s. The Beatles dominated the airwaves, cities pulsed with new energy. And amidst this transformation stood an unlikely revolution, the bright red pump handle of Watney's Red Barrel. This was not merely another beer. Red Barrel was Britain's first kegged and pasteurized pint, promising unprecedented freshness and consistency across every pub in the kingdom. For the first time in British history, a working man could expect exactly the same pint whether he ordered it in London, Liverpool, or Land's End. During its peak years, Red Barrel was everywhere. Seaside resorts, factory canteens, and high-street pubs all featured that distinctive red pump. The advertising campaigns were relentless, embedding memorable slogans into the national consciousness, but as the 1970s progressed, something fundamental shifted. The campaign for real ale positioned Red Barrel as soulless and industrialized. The same consistency that made it famous became its downfall. Critics described it as bland and characterless. Comedy shows mocked it mercilessly. By the late 1970s, ordering Red Barrel had become embarrassing. Production ceased in the early 1980s, ending one of the most significant chapters in British brewing history. Yet, for those who lived through its golden age, that distinctive red logo still evokes powerful memories of smoky pubs and simpler times. The aspirational brew. Double Diamond Whitbread Pale Ale. A Double Diamond works wonders. This infectious jingle transformed a modest Burton-upon-Trent Pale Ale into a national phenomenon and captured the optimism of post-war Britain. The beer itself was understated. Light amber with a smooth, slightly buttery flavor, it possessed an easy drinking quality that appealed across social classes. But Double Diamond's genius lay in its revolutionary marketing. Campaigns of the 1960s and 1970s, the television commercials featured working-class heroes in extraordinary situations, all resolved through the magical intervention of a pint of Double Diamond. These advertisements spoke to a generation experiencing unprecedented prosperity and social mobility. The beer became associated with confidence, success, and the belief that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things. The slogan "Works Wonders" became so embedded in British culture that it transcended advertising to become part of everyday language. At its peak in the 1970s, Double Diamond was one of Britain's most popular beers, available in virtually every pub nationwide. However, the 1980s brought dramatic changes. Continental lagers like Heineken and Stella Artois suddenly made traditional British ales seem old-fashioned. The marketing that had once seemed innovative now appeared dated and patronizing. As lager sales soared, Double Diamond's market share plummeted. By the early 2000s, Double Diamond had effectively disappeared. Today, it exists primarily in memory and nostalgia, representing an era when British industry was confident and people genuinely believed that simple pleasures could work wonders. The soul of Sussex, King and Barnes Old Ale. Not every great beer sought national fame. Some were content to be the beating heart of their local community. King and Barnes Old Ale was precisely such a beer, and its story is one of roots, tradition, and irreplaceable loss. The King and Barnes Brewery stood in Horsham, West Sussex, for over 200 years. Established in 1800, their old ale was a masterpiece of traditional English brewing. Rich chestnut in color, it demanded attention and respect. The aroma combined deep malt sweetness with subtle notes of caramel and dried fruits. At 4.8% alcohol, it was perfectly calibrated for contemplative drinking. This was the beer of Sunday afternoon sessions, harvest festivals, and quiet evenings by the fire. Local pub landlords took enormous pride in serving it properly. From traditional hand pumps, the beer's reputation extended beyond Sussex borders, attracting enthusiasts who would make pilgrimages to experience this authentic taste of traditional English brewing. Beer writers regularly featured it as a perfect example of regional brewing excellence. However, consolidation in the brewing industry meant small operations found it increasingly difficult to compete. In 2000, the inevitable happened. King & Barnes was acquired and the Horsham Brewery closed permanently. For the people of Horsham and surrounding Sussex communities, the loss was profound. Old ale had been a liquid link to their heritage, connecting them to generations who had drunk the same beer in the same pubs. The soul of Sussex, as embodied in that distinctive ale, was extinguished forever. The pride of Sheffield, Stone's bitter and industrial Sheffield, where steel was king and hard work was a way of life, there existed a beer that was more than just a beverage. Stone's bitter was a badge of identity, a symbol of pride, and a declaration of belonging. Established in 1868, the Stones Brewery was intimately connected to Sheffield's industrial character. The beer was perfectly calibrated for steel workers and miners. Golden with bright clarity, it possessed a clean, refreshing character with pronounced but not aggressive bitterness. This was the beer of workers finishing grueling shifts, of football supporters gathering before matches, of Friday night celebrations. The distinctive Stones pump clips became as familiar in Sheffield pubs as the city's famous chimney stacks against the skyline dot by the 1980s. Stones had achieved something remarkable. It became one of the best-selling bitter brands in the entire United Kingdom. This success was built not on flashy marketing, but on genuine grassroots popularity and word-of-mouth recommendation. However, success came at a cost. Corporate acquisition led to gradual changes in brewing processes and eventual relocation away from Sheffield. The final insult came in 2011 when production of the traditional cask versions ceased entirely. For many Sheffield residents, the death of authentic Stones represented more than losing a favorite drink. It symbolized the decline of British manufacturing and the victory of corporate efficiency over community values. The pubs continued serving beer, but they had lost the taste of their own history. The quiet constant, Whitbread Pale Ale beers achieved significance through sheer reliability rather than bold statements. Whitbread Pale Ale belonged to this category, earning its place through quiet, dependable presence in millions of ordinary moments. Established in 1742, Whitbread possessed one of the longest pedigrees in British brewing. Their pale ale was gentle amber in color with subtle aroma and clean, uncomplicated flavor. At 3.5% alcohol, it was designed for regular consumption, the beer equivalent of a reliable friend. This was the beer fathers shared with sons in pub gardens, teaching about responsible drinking and adult conversation. It was opened during family gatherings, providing gentle social lubrication that enhanced rather than dominated the experience. Regular customers would have their usual pint pulled the moment they walked through the pub door. The beer's marketing emphasized reliability, tradition, and quality rather than bold claims. Whitbread positioned their pale ale as a drink for discerning customers who valued consistency over novelty. However, these very qualities eventually became liabilities. The 1980s brought continental lagers offering excitement and modernity. The craft beer revolution of the early 2000s demanded bold flavors and innovation. The subtle character that had been Whitbread's strength was now perceived as blandness. The end came quietly, almost unnoticed. Production simply ceased without fanfare. For those who remember, its disappearance represents the loss of understatement in brewing and the beauty of simple pleasures well executed. The memory in every glass. These forgotten beers represent more than discontinued products. They are liquid archaeology, preserving the essence of particular times and places in British history. Through their flavors, we can taste the optimism of the 1960s. Industrial pride, quiet suburban contentment, and deep-rooted rural traditions. Their disappearance reflects broader changes, manufacturing decline, erosion of local identity, cultural homogenization, and the pursuit of efficiency over character. Each lost beer is a thread pulled from the complex tapestry of British life, yet memory preserves what commerce discards. In stories shared between generations, in faded pub photographs, in vintage advertising, these beers live on. They remind us that progress is not always improvement, and some things, once lost, cannot be replaced. The next time you raise a glass, consider the weight of history it carries. Every beer tells a story and connects us to those who came before. In understanding what we have lost, we can better appreciate what remains. These forgotten beers earn their place in history not through longevity, but through the lives they touched and memories they created. The pints may be poured, the breweries silent, but the memories remain as rich and complex as the beers that created them.